Buenas, buenas. Welcome to In the Daw. I'm Kevin Ochoa, and today we're going to be taking a look at two sounds that I made. First is this one, and the second is this right here. So opening up the patcher, and one last thing I want to do. All right. So these sounds, especially the second one, is not really conventional. So I would not use this in an actual track. However, you could use it for effects. You could use it for as a way to start learning how to make your kicks. Because when you're first making kicks, you're not really gonna have the best sounding um, sound design. So what I like to do sometimes to experiment is create a patcher and just get really messy with it. The whole point of this is to learn how to create sounds, and that's actually how I came up with this with the lead over here. After messing around with this for hours, I got a sound like that. So basically, I was trying to make a kick that was just super distorted, super clicky, kind of like Sub-Zero Project, but just experimenting to see how I can make the attack and the tail end of a kick very differently. So I have four citruses. I'm actually only using three of them at the moment, though. If I bring in the fourth one, and let's make this gross beat do a sidechain, so it's a little bit more natural sounding. It just up to taste. Now, as you can see here, I have separated my two citruses into two different things. So I have my top kick and my bottom part of the kick. So let's listen to the bottom part of the kick. It's just a pretty standard saw wave. You could even do a little bit of different types of things with citrus. You can add some harmonics in here by messing around with the waveform. You can get some pretty experimental things with it. So I'd give it a try to see what suits you. Now, I'm probably going to go into much bigger depth in a different patcher, but once I clean this up. But let's go ahead and do the next sound. So I have the mid part of the kick. It's not like a bark. This is more like a squeak, I would say. And there's a ton of reverb over here. However, also the middle part, the bottom part of the kick is also going into the reverb, even though I'm removing the low end and both the early and the late reflections. So, by the way, this VSR 24, it's a very good reverb. It's insanely clean. Next up is basically the punch of the kick. And it has a ton of reverb on it, but again, it's all for sound design purposes. If I take the reverb off, it's going to sound a little bit more empty. So let's take this and turn the reverb on. Again, this is meant for, in my case, to do the effects kick. So that's why I added the long reverb. Now, if I wanted less of it, it'd be more suited towards having the kick and drop. Pretty cool. Now, what I'm doing here is two things. It's just distortion and EQing. So based on the video that I made a couple months ago with the hardstyle kicks, I got in better, but those tips that I gave in that video are still really good. So I'm going to link it down below. But essentially, I'm removing the high end from the citrus, which is kind of redundant because I have just a sine wave, but sometimes I am adding harmonics in this case. and I am removing some of the high end from him and only leaving stuff up to 500. And then on the next one, I'm using Devastor to distort it, and so on and so forth. Now, what I did specifically in the low end part was I created a different send right here, and I sent it to a Fruity Phaser, which is going back into the same distortion unit as the rest of the bottom end. But I'm also using an EQ to just to focus on that, so that way I'm not phasing any of the bottom end. Let's take a listen to that. And without, I mean with the sub, but without the phaser. And the whole context of the whole kick, it does add up. So let's remove the phaser from the kick. So ideally what you want to do is bounce this out and find the one with the right phaser that you like and bounce it out. These are the phaser settings. I'm doing it throughout the whole frequency range. I'm making it a bit wide. You could even do it wider. And I'm also doing a sweep here. You can add feedback, but in this case, I didn't want to. And it's 100% wet since it's going on its own little send. And up here for the mid part of the kick, the main thing that's going on is this EQ right here, where I'm boosting extremely at 587. Now, what's going on here is I'm not just boosting this EQ, since I'm boosting it and then adding distortion afterwards multiple times, as right here and in the wave shaper over here. What that distortion is actually doing is creating a new set of harmonics. So it's boosting up these harmonics that were not here prior to it. And if we turn off both distortions, and the ones after it, there's a ton of distortion, so we don't get all those high-end ones. But once we start putting in those distortions, we start getting those high-end harmonics that were not there prior to this boost. And once again, let's take off the boost. Cool. I'm also taking part of the low end because I don't need it, because I'm going to be using it for the punch over here. All right, and I'm also sending it to its own reverb sometimes, just to make it sound a little bit different from the rest of the kick. So let's bring in that reverb in. Gives it more like a sense of having a clap there. And let's check out the punch. Pretty straightforward, and there's nothing much to it. It's just a pitch envelope on a... Sorry about that. That's my timer telling me to finish with this. But it's just basically a pitch envelope on a sine wave. Like I mentioned previously, you can change the harmonics, but since this is meant to be punchy, I don't really want to do that. The volume envelope lets me allow how long I want the sine wave to be. So this would sometimes collide with my sub, so I might want to reduce it. But let's take a listen to it with the sub. Also, by the way, this is really messy right now, so you would try to clean it via EQ and removing some distortions. So that's it for this one part, and let's go back to that little screechy thing. So the little screechy lead I showed earlier, this one, all that really is removing the bottom end. Sorry, all that really is removing the bottom end from that kick, and then adding a square wave instead of having a sine wave. So if we have a a sine wave, it sounds like the mid part of the kick. And it's pretty much the same thing, except I didn't remove the low end in this one. And I actually sending it to reverb and delay on my mix bus. But when I add the square wave, it changes the harmonics, and also I'm adding unisono to it. So with those nice voices detuned to the max inside Citrus, it just gives it a very wide and distorted sound. So yeah, so that's basically it for these sounds. I'll make a video more in depth about how patcher works, because this is very interesting to experiment with. Maybe not for bouncing them out and using them instead of kick as your main kick of a track, but certainly to make parts of a kick and also to experiment and to see what works. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys learned something today. I'm Kevin Ochoa with In the DAW, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.